The conversation around this situation really starts with one clear point, and that is the growing frustration viewers are feeling when it comes to honesty and accountability. What we are watching is not just relationship issues playing out, but patterns repeating themselves in ways that are becoming harder to ignore. The dynamic between Ken and Trisha is a perfect example of that. From the outside, it already feels unstable, but when you start listening closely to what is being said and how it is being said, it becomes clear that the foundation is not solid at all. It feels like two people trying to hold something together without actually fixing what is broken underneath. Ken's behavior is what really stands out. The way he handled the situation with the direct messages was not just careless, it was revealing. Instead of showing regret or even trying to explain himself in a meaningful way, he treated it like it was something small, almost insignificant. And that reaction alone says a lot. Because when someone is in a relationship and they openly admit to entertaining other people without showing any real concern, it creates a bigger issue than just the action itself. It becomes about respect. It becomes about priorities. And most importantly, it becomes about how seriously that person takes the relationship. What makes it even more frustrating is how casually everything was presented. There was no real sense of accountability, no real effort to repair the damage. It almost felt like he was saying, "This is who I am, take it or leave it." And while honesty is important, honesty without care can feel disrespectful. There is a difference between being real and being dismissive, and in this situation, it clearly leaned more toward dismissal. That is why so many people are questioning not just his actions, but his intentions overall. At the same time, Trisha's response adds another layer to the situation. Instead of addressing things directly in the moment, it feels like she holds things in. That silence, that hesitation to speak up, creates space for the problem to grow bigger. Because when something hurts you and you do not express it clearly, it does not just disappear, it builds. And eventually, it comes out in ways that are harder to control. That is what makes this dynamic feel so tense. One person is acting without care, and the other is reacting without clarity. This is where the idea of playing games starts to make more sense, because from the outside, it doesn't look like two people trying to fix a relationship. It looks like two people moving in opposite directions while still holding on to the label of being together. Ken is doing what he wants, and Trisha is trying to process everything without fully confronting it. That imbalance is what makes the situation feel so unstable. When Marsau stepped into the conversation, his perspective added something important. He did not come in yelling or trying to create drama. Instead, he pointed out something simple but very real. You cannot build something strong if your actions are already showing that you are halfway out. Moving out, talking to other people, and acting single while still claiming to be in a relationship sends a very clear message. And that message is that the commitment is not fully there. What makes his words hit differently is the way he delivered them. It was not emotional, it was logical. And sometimes that kind of calm honesty is more powerful than any argument because it forces people to actually think about what they are doing instead of just reacting. When he said that both of them were playing games, it was not an attack, it was an observation. And based on everything we are seeing, it is hard to disagree with that. Another interesting part of this situation is how easily people focus on one side and ignore the other. A lot of attention has been placed on Trisha's behavior, her reactions, and her communication style. And while she is not perfect, it feels like Ken has been getting away with a lot without the same level of scrutiny. That is starting to change now, because once he openly admitted to his actions, it became harder to ignore what he brings into the relationship. The bigger issue here is not just about messages or communication with other people. It's about trust. Once trust starts to break, everything else becomes harder to maintain. Every conversation feels different. Every silence feels louder. Every action gets questioned. And if that trust is not repaired quickly and honestly, the relationship starts to fall apart piece by piece. There is also something to be said about the way both of them justify their behavior. When things are not going well, it becomes easier to excuse actions that would normally be unacceptable. Ken used the distance between them as a reason for his behavior, but that raises an important question. If the relationship was that disconnected, why not end it first? Why stay in something that you were not fully committed to? That is where the confusion comes in, because it creates a situation where both people are technically together, but emotionally somewhere else. On the other side, Trisha seems to respond more emotionally. Instead of addressing things step by step, it feels like she absorbs everything until it becomes too much. That kind of response is understandable, especially in situations where someone feels hurt or uncertain, but it also makes it harder to resolve issues because nothing is being clearly communicated in real time. What we are really seeing here is a breakdown in communication from both sides, and once communication starts to fail, everything else follows. Misunderstandings grow, assumptions take over, and eventually both people start reacting to what they think is happening instead of what is actually being said. Another layer to this situation is the idea of image versus reality. From the outside, it might look like a relationship that is going through a rough patch, but when you listen closely, it feels deeper than that. It feels like two people who are not fully aligned in what they want or how they handle problems. And that difference creates constant tension. Marsau's involvement also brings attention to something else, the importance of recognizing patterns. When certain behaviors keep repeating, it is no longer about one mistake. It becomes a pattern, and patterns are harder to ignore because they show consistency. The mention of repeated behavior, especially when it comes to communication with other women, suggests that this is not a one-time issue. It is something that has been happening over time. That realization changes everything because it shifts the focus from what happened to what keeps happening. And once that shift happens, the conversation becomes much more serious. It is no longer about fixing one problem. It's about deciding whether the relationship itself can actually work. There is also an emotional side to all of this that cannot be ignored. Being in a situation where you feel unsure, unheard, or disrespected takes a toll over time. It affects how you see the other person, and it affects how you see yourself in the relationship. That emotional weight is clear in the way both of them respond. One is frustrated and detached, the other is hurt and guarded. At the end of the day, this situation reflects something that a lot of people can relate to. Relationships are not just about staying together. They're about effort, respect, and clear communication. When those things are missing, it doesn't matter how long people stay. The connection starts to weaken. What makes this story so interesting is that it is still unfolding. There are still questions that have not been answered. Will there be real accountability? Will there be honest conversations that actually lead to change? Or will things continue the way they are, with both people holding on to something that is already falling apart? Right now, it feels like a turning point. The truth has been exposed in a way that cannot be ignored anymore. And once that happens, there are only two options: either face it and work through it, or continue avoiding it until everything eventually breaks. And based on everything we are seeing, the next steps will say more than anything that has already been said.